Hello there, Professor Sock again. The topic this time has to do with the origins of psychology. Today, psychology is defined as the science of behavior and mental processes. Psychology can be traced back to the writings of great philosophers, such as Aristotle. He was a Greek philosopher who wrote about topics such as sleep, dreams, the senses, and memory. Early philosophers laid the groundwork for the nature-nurture issue, which continues to be centered in psychology today. Now, the debate is often framed now in terms of heredity or nature versus environment or nurture. Now, physiology is a branch of biology that studies the functions and parts of living organisms. Physiologists, early scientific discoveries led to the idea that scientific methods could be applied to issues of human behavior and thinking. German physiologist William Wundt, who lived from 1832 to 1920, published his landmark text, Principles of Physiological Psychology, in 1874. In 1879, he opened the first psychology research laboratory at the University of Leipzig. Wundt defined psychology as the study of consciousness and emphasized the use of experimental methods to study and measure consciousness. So William Wundt is considered the founder of psychology. Now, Edward B. Titchener, who lived from 1867 to 1927, formally established structuralism, the first major school of thought in psychology. It held that complex conscious experiences could be broken down into elemental structures or component parts of sensation and feelings. To identify the structures of conscious thought, Titchener formed and trained subjects in a procedure called introspection. The limitations of introspection, the most important being that it was unreliable, and pretty much fell to the wayside on Titchener's death in 1927. William James, who lived from 1842 to 1910, was an American physiologist and psychologist whose dynamic views had an enormous impact on the development of psychology in the United States. His ideas became the basis of a new school of psychology called functionalism. Functionalism expressed the importance of how behavior functions to allow people and animals to adapt to their environments. Functionalists examined how psychology could be applied in areas such as education, child rearing, and the work environment. An outstanding teacher, James wrote Principles of Psychology, published in 1890 in 2 volumes. Next, we have G. Stanley Hall, 1844 to 1924. He received the first PhD in psychology, awarded in the United States. He established the first psychology research laboratory in the United States at Johns Hopkins University in 1883. He began publishing the American Journal of Psychology. In 1892, Hall founded and was elected the first president of the American Psychological Association, sometimes referred to as the APA. Mary Whitten Calkins, 1863 to 1930, was an American psychologist who conducted research on memory, personality, and dreams, and established a psychological laboratory at Wellesley College in 1891. She wrote a well-received textbook titled Introduction to Psychology and was the first woman to be elected president of the APA in 1905. Please note her title was Ms. Calkins, not Dr. Calkins, even though she went to Harvard and met all the requirements for a PhD in psychology. The great school of Harvard decided that since she was a woman, they could not give her a PhD. Next is Margaret Floyd Washburn, who lived from 1871 to 1939 and was the first American woman to officially earn a PhD in psychology. In 1908, she published an influential text titled The Animal Mind. And in 1921, she became the second woman elected president of the APA. Now, many of you will recognize this next name, Sigmund Freud, who lived from 1856 to 1939. He was an Austrian physician and the founder of psychoanalysis. Now, psychoanalysis emphasized human behavior as motivated by unconscious conflicts, which are almost always sexual or aggressive in nature. Past experiences, especially childhood experiences, are critical to the formation of adult personality and behavior, according to Dr. Freud. Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality also provided the basis for a distinct form of psychotherapy. Next, we have behaviorism. In the early 1900s, the school of psychology called behaviorism emerged as the dominating force. It emphasized the study of overt behavior, observable behaviors that could be objectively measured and verified. The first name that we associate with behaviorism is Dr. Ivan Pavlov, 1849 to 1936. He was a Russian physiologist whose pioneering research on learning contributed to the development of behaviorism. He discovered a basic learning process that involves the association of stimuli. John B. Watson, 1878 to 1958, was an American psychologist who championed behaviorism, emphasizing the study of observable behavior and rejecting the study of mental processes. The goal of behaviorists was to discover the fundamental principles of learning. B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist and, like Watson, a strong proponent of behaviorism. Between Watson and Skinner, behaviorism dominated American psychology for almost half a century. The next thing to come about in psychology was humanistic psychology. In the 1950s, a new school of thought called humanistic psychology emerged. It was so distinctly different from both psychoanalysis and behaviorism that it was sometimes referred to as the third force in American psychology. One of the big names in this type of humanistic psychology is Carl Rogers, who lived from 1901 to 1987. He was the American psychologist who founded the School of Humanistic Psychology. This school emphasized conscious experiences, including each person's unique potential for psychological growth and self-direction, self-determination, free will, and the importance of choice in human behavior. And then we have the very important fellow, Abraham Maslow, who lived from 1908 to 1970. He was the American humanistic psychologist who developed a theory of motivation that emphasized psychological growth. That concludes episode 1.2 of As the Psyche Turns. Thank you very much for your attention.